The United Nations says it supports the government for its effort to try and bring about peace and restore the rule of law in the country. There has been concerns over the loss of lives and damage to property as the unrest continues in some parts of KwaZulu-Natal and here in Gauteng. Let's take a look now at the governance perspective of the unrest that we have observed over the last few days. Joining us to discuss this is Democracy Works Foundation founder, that's Professor William Gumede. Bob Gumede, thank you very much for your time. I don't think there's any doubt in anyone's mind that there have been governance failures. List them for us.
For me, there are 5 core governance failures, and thank you for inviting me. I think the first thing is the rule of law clearly has collapsed. And then the second one, clearly the state's inability to enforce the law and to enforce compliance, really almost where we can say the state failure. Then for me, the third one is no respect for property rights. And then for me, the next one is violence with impunity. That people, protests turns into violence, into looting with impunity. And maybe there's the extra one that one could add is the failure by the police and the army to be there quickly enough. There's almost like a service delivery failure because, the police is a public service. It has to, it has to protect people's security. So the failure to protect people's security.
Yeah, and perhaps that's the one, Prof, that I suspect people are very disappointed with or disappointed in, the security of the country. Do we even talk about the existence of our intelligence services, or are we being harsh when we say perhaps it doesn't exist?
So for me, the failure of our intelligence agency, the failure of the police, and also the failure of the army. I mean, the army took a very long time after the president said they need to be there. They took 48 hours and they were not even in some of the hotspots in KwaZulu-Natal. But our intelligence services, I think, must bear the brunt of criticism. Now, if you think about it, the moment when Jacob Zuma said that he is not going to go freely to prison, and his supporters said that they're going to build a wall around him to prevent his arrest. Now, that is the moment where intelligence was supposed to be deployed. It was supposed to provide information, and then also where the police were then supposed to be ready. Even the army at that moment was supposed to be deployed at places in the province.
Prof, I listened with almost despair yesterday, and you'll tell me if I'm being hysterical here. I listened to the Minister of State Security. It was the day before yesterday. I think it was on Tuesday when they addressed. And she said, there is coordination in the unrest that we have seen. Then yesterday, she's followed up by her deputy, Zizi Godwa, who goes to Soweto to say that we know that this is being coordinated. We know some of the names. And yet they are not telling the public that there have been arrests. Why in the world should South Africans believe that these ministers are even competent to begin with?
I mean, for me, a couple of things there is either, it's a lack, we're starting with a lack of competence. If people haven't thought about it, it became very clear. I mean, the incidences that you've shown. But secondly, also, you must remember the intelligence and the police and even the army under the Jacob Zuma presidency was captured. He deployed his own people there, loyalists, but he also employed over-promoted, incompetent cadres, who would be uncritical to him. So that is, one stumbling block still. So clearly, there hasn't been, since Ramaphosa has taken over as president, there's been no cleanup of the police and the army and the intelligence services. I mean, even if you look at start of the unrest itself, it clearly looked, if you're an outsider, observer, it looked like a planned, a stage, almost like a staged unrest. I mean, the protests happen at strategic key points in KwaZulu-Natal, strategic commercial hubs, almost simultaneously, very, very quick. Clearly, it was an intelligence operation. So clearly, there was some rogue intelligence involved there. And the ministers could say publicly that they know who the people are who are involved in this, and they don't arrest and name the names. I mean, that is shocking in extreme.
Prof, let's end the conversation with who the ultimate blame is going to sit with. The fact is here, Prof, the ANC has run government for over 20 years. It is still in charge. And therefore, whether you've had a mess-up in the Zuma era, right now, Cyril Ramaphosa is the president. The fact that he has not seen it fit to reshuffle his cabinet when there are so glaring, wherein there is such glaring incompetence in some of his, or with some of his ministers, surely he must take the ultimate blame for this country going up in flames in a matter of days.
Absolutely. You know, the ANC as the governing party is to blame, because this is an internal dispute of the ANC that turns bloody, but impacts not only the ANC, but impact the whole country. And the president, Cyril Ramaphosa, as the president, he must take, ultimate responsibility. He himself also was not present during this crisis. When you have a crisis like that, the president has to be, has to drop everything and has to be around 24 hours. He's supposed to send his deployees to every, hotspot. They have to be there, in person. None of those things have happened. And I mean, this is sad. Of course, the impact on the economy. This is our recovery, and I know some analysts, economic analysts, were saying will take us 3 years. I beg to differ. It will take us double, 5 or 6 years to recover from this. And then we also have the health issue, COVID-19. I mean, we're going to have a third, a fourth, a fifth wave because of this. So at least he can do is reshuffle his cabinet.
Prof, I'm completely out of time, and I'm getting into trouble here. The fact that the president is still not visible. Yes, he's visible on screen, on TV. How should South Africans gain confidence in him that he is in charge?
If he wants to show us he's in charge, because the looting has gone on unabated, it appears the president is not in charge. The government is not in charge. The government has lost control. In order to recover the initiative, he has to be physically present, in some of the hotspots. His cabinet ministers must be there. His National Executive Committee members must be there. All of them has to speak in public condemning the looting and the violence. They've been quiet. There's been a veil of silence, or almost as if they're afraid to say anything.
All right, Professor William Gumede, thank you very much for your time and indeed for your insight.